the Woodstock Film Festival and the town and the whole, you know, reputation, I suppose you could say, of Woodstock is a draw for people. They're curious about it. It has a lot of history. The name has a lot of connections and associations, and people really love the whole idea of what Woodstock represents. So, people love to show their films here, and then people love to come and see those films. So, I think that's a big part of it too. And you get a real fun time when you come up here.
Thank you for joining us for the Woodstock Film Festival Let's Talk Film podcast. I'm your host, Katie Mejia. The Woodstock Film Festival is a haven for networking with high-caliber industry members, voting members of the Academy, filmmakers, musicians, and fiercely independent artists. The 24th annual festival takes place September 27th to October 1st. Submit your film today. We are here with Adam Shartoff, founder of Filmwax. His podcast, Filmwax Radio, has since grown into a familiar and popular part of the indie landscape. So to start off, why don't you tell us about your history with the Woodstock Film Festival?
Sure. Well, and I did a film interview podcast and have been doing a film interview podcast for so many years. I started in 2011. Did not know what the heck I was doing at the time. One great place just to always strike oil would be going to a film festival, of course, where you could just see lots of filmmakers and actors and industry professionals, etc. So I started coming to the Woodstock Film Festival in the journalist mode, and I'm pretty sure it was the podcast was going by then, actually. But and I just would come up, see as many films as I could, interview as many folks at the festival as I could. And it became just a regular annual event for me. I always enjoyed the size of the festival and the types of films that you guys were programming. And then, you just create relationships and friendships in the process. So, and it played a big role in my decision to actually move to the Hudson Valley ultimately.
That's great. I mean, for most people, they come up to the Hudson Valley and they might just visit Woodstock and not necessarily, it's kind of got that touristy vibe. But then once they plug in, they really see that this is way better than New York City. I don't know why people continue to live there, but I get it. There's a lot of work, but it's a beautiful place. So
there's a lot of resources and support, especially if you're like in the film world. New York City is a has its advantages for sure, but
100%. But you always notice that the screenwriters and the filmmakers, the long time ones, they have houses up here and they're like up here most of the time and go down there for meetings. They're
right.
like,
Yeah, they start appreciating sanity after a while. So that's true.
Exactly.
So there's definitely a synergy between the city and what we have up here in the mid Hudson Valley.
It is. It's nice. I mean, it's not too far, and you can always, reconnect if you, maybe you were in New York City for a long time grinding away and need to get some nature. You can always pop up here. But so that leads me to my next question. Why should people come to the festival in Woodstock? And what's so great about the Hudson Valley?
It provides or offers up just a different whole experience than the urban experience. You come up here in the early fall. My God, it's so beautiful for one thing, and there's an electricity too, and also what's really nice about the Woodstock Film Festival is, and I don't know if everybody knows this, but it's actually only partially in Woodstock. It's grown over the years and is in actually like at least 4, 5, 6 sometimes towns, including it used to be Rhinebeck. It's not at the moment, but for sure in Saugerties and in Rosendale and Kingston and sometimes some events in other towns around the area. But so you get to see a bit of the landscape and get a real taste of the Hudson Valley. Another thing, just to answer your question, is that the Woodstock Film Festival and the town and the whole, reputation, I suppose you could say, of Woodstock is a draw for people. They're curious about it. It has a lot of history. The name, has a lot of connections and associations, and people really love the whole idea of what Woodstock represents. So people love to show their films here, and then people love to come and see those films. So I think that's a big part of it too. And you get a real fun time when you come up here.
So how long have you been coming to the festival? How many years? Because it's now almost its 25th
I know. I
anniversary.
would say probably about midway. I started coming, when I first started this whole thing, I mean, in terms of podcasting and just, visiting festivals, I started really just in New York City. I didn't know really much about other festivals. But when I would go to, let's say, the New York Film Festival, I would overhear people, colleagues say, or after this, we're going up to the Woodstock Film Festival. And I would started to get very intrigued by the idea about going as soon as I could. So I would say it was pretty early in the last decade. It's been at least 10 years, though. I mean, I could easily say 10 years, if not more than that I've been coming up.
10 years. So there's got to be a lot of memories. So that's kind of leads me to the next question. Do you have anything that pops out that is kind of one of your favorite festival memories?
Well, one of my favorite things about it is that I would, as a sort of, how would you say, not, I'm a single, divorced father, and have been for long. So I would try to align my weekends with my son when, that he could come with me to the festivals. That's a great memory, and he has a bunch of times. And that's always been a great thing to be able to take him and go see some films. One time, I think this might have been the last summer before the pandemic, and I'm probably wrong, but I think if it wasn't the last festival before the pandemic, it might have been the one before, where a good friend of the festival, Larry Pheasant and son Jack, who himself is now a friend of the festival, showed his feature film, and it was the world premiere. And so it was fun to take my son to that, and to be sitting there, and for him to get the whole experience. And he himself is now considering pursuing a film career of sorts. So my son,
Wow, it must have had a huge impact. So what age was he at that point? I mean, when did you
and his
first?
mother is an actress, and she does movie and TV.
Right. Okay.
So there's that too.
There's that too.
Yeah. What year? Yeah,
How
I
old
think it was.
he?
At the time, probably like, I don't know, 13 or
Oh,
something.
that's cool.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a 7-year-old and she's really interested in performance too. So I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder what age, because she already is watching, films with us. We watch a lot of movies, obviously. That's like the thing you do when you're a movie buff with families. You just have family movie night. So I can imagine she would be really into a festival. I mean, that's really cool that you brought him. And now he's seeing like a side of it that he could potentially be a part of it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And there's been just, lots of special moments at Q&As, and or when I remember, I have to make sure when I bring these things up that I remember names and everything, because I don't want to sound like an idiot. But I've had some really fun experiences, and because I was like an early podcaster at the Woodstock Film Festival, so they really didn't know what to do with me. Like, where am I going to do my interviews? And so I'd be sitting in all sorts of weird areas there. So
yeah, podcasts, I mean, they've just really taken off, and I was actually really into them very, very early on, a good 15 years ago, before anybody really knew either. So it was interesting to be in that landscape. And then now, today, I mean, your podcast is pretty amazing. Like, I took a look at it, and I wanted to get into it later more, and also talk about how you were able to kind of keep that energy going and keep it going, because it's a definite today the podcasting world has kind of overtaken mainstream media, and it's become something that's very popular. And so it's great for us to be able to talk about things and just have a platform, so I want to get into that. One of the things that the festival always talks about is being fiercely independent. And so I know that that's important to you as well. And so maybe if you could just talk to us a little bit more about what that means to you and why that's important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because, I my whole life, I should rephrase this, not my entire life, because actually I worked for a big media corporation for many years. I worked at Sony Music, and that was a big music corporation, distribution company. But I did love working there, because there were so many great people, and because we were creating music. But one thing I learned was that it's still at the was about the bottom line, and it was still a corporate. You're still working for a corporation, and one thing I would notice, Katie, was that like I would get a CD or an album of a great artist, like somebody who's really great, innovative songwriter, musician, great, but they would not market those people. They would market Mariah Carey. They would market Celine Dion. They would market, even Bob Dylan. And this is, by the way, no reflection of the quality of those artists so much as just that they were fortunate enough to make mass audiences and bring a lot of money to the corporation, right? So, but these other artists, they didn't even give them barely a chance to perform, not meaning to show themselves that they could actually be successful and sell albums and etc. So when I left there, shortly after I was let go, very shortly after that, in fact, well, there were massive layoffs, and I turned to, and then I started really understanding the spirit of independence, independent, and how beautiful the arts are when they are really independent, and so it's like this window of time where a filmmaker is getting their first films out often, like in the music industry too. And it's that earlier phase, and then they're making stuff that they really are passionate about. They don't have to make too many compromises often, and that was what was so exciting about going to the festivals, because that's where you really get the taste of that. And so that's why I really fell in love with going to film festivals. And oftentimes the way the conveyor belt works, or the trajectory plays out, is that the more talented filmmakers, if they can stick with it, if they can survive, they'll end up with more lucrative opportunities, and they'll start to get hired by corporations. And I understand it. I'm not living in a fantasy world. People got to make money and want to have success, and but that's why I created Filmwax, though, is to kind of be there. And I guess in some small way, maybe I'm helping to put give attention to some of these people.
Definitely.
But I still keep Filmwax. 90% of it is people that the average person will never have heard of, like Woodstock Film Festival. The directors, yes, some of them, of course, people know them, but by and large, you'd say one of the directors, or nobody's heard of their name. So they need the help, and I work at it as a sidebar. I work at an independent radio station too, and we are playing artists that you typically don't hear. There's some really wonderful artists like Brandy Carlisle, or Sheryl Crow, or something. I'm just coming up with names of broadly distributed artists, but we'll play artists that you're not as quickly as familiar with the average person, or we'll play deeper cuts. We're just trying to do something, and it's not a big moneymaker, trust me, but it's still really important to me that we get choices, and that there's stuff out there that's grittier and uncompromised. And Woodstock Film Festival is really positioned to be part of all that. The Hudson Valley clearly is, on the rise.
So let's get back into your podcast. So,
Okay, yeah.
So you said you had 750 episodes and 1,200 guests. I mean, that's just
760.
That is epic. I mean, let's just try to pull out a couple of your favorite episodes, just so we can get people to go check out your stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I know it's hard. It's like,
it is hard, but go ahead.
It's like, what's your favorite movie, or one of your favorite movies? I mean, it's so hard.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of ones that stand out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
I've had some incredible experiences with episodes where nobody will have heard of the person or whatever. And what for me is more pleasurable as a host of it could be very different than the average listener too. It's my experience, has nothing to do with their experience, and a lot of times. But well, I mean, okay, one of my favorite filmmakers is Mike Leigh, the British. I know I don't play him at the Woodstock Film Festival very often, but He's just like makes these movies, and I discovered him when I was very young adult, and I was walking around the village one day in the city, and I saw this poster outside. It was like the Quad or one of a smaller theater, might have been the Angelica, and it was like called Life is Sweet, and I just liked the title and I liked the poster. I walked in, I watched the movie, and my life was changed. And then flash forward 20 years, and I've met Mike Lee like half a dozen times, but he's done my podcast now twice. And the first time he did the podcast a few years ago, maybe a bunch of years ago, he's cranky. He's a cranky bastard. You know what I mean? He's like, he doesn't suffer fools. He's just, but he had just flown in from LA that morning, and he had this great a time at some screening or something. And he came in, he was just in all smiles. And he was in a great mood, and and then I found out just before that started, I had like 20 minutes with him or something like that, that the guy after me had to cancel. So the publicist who had arranged this, and I do some of these on my own, I book some of them on my own, and I book a lot of them with publicists. But the publicist at that interview said, "You have twice the amount of time." So all of a sudden I had 45 minutes with Mike Lee. And which is like a dream come true, but it's also
a hero.
Yeah, because I love his movies, but at the same time, it's a bit overwhelming because now I wasn't prepared for 45 minutes. But you know what? I didn't have to be, because he was talking. He was very forthcoming. They did a tribute to him at Lincoln Center, Film at Lincoln Center, unless I'm mistaken. I think it was Film at Lincoln Center, did a tribute to him last year, and I got him back on, and it was on Zoom. It wasn't quite as exciting, and I doubt he remembered me, but we had an okay time, but it wasn't quite the same magic. But that first time, oh my God, that was one of my favorites. Kenneth Branagh, another Brit, I know, but he was fantastic. That stands out. We just had a great time, and it's one of my favorites. But there's so many. I mean, I will say, I got Werner Herzog on my show, which was another like big deal, and it happened right after I moved up here. And it's funny because like, no matter how much I would have prepared, it didn't matter. He was gonna, no, you're wrong. It was like, it was just this, it was gonna be, so I had to kind of go with it and just be okay with feeling like a dummy. But he was fantastic. I mean, I sat across from Liv Ullmann, and she did my show once years ago. You're sitting across from not only my heroes, but my parents' heroes. My parents introduced me to all these, European art films from the 60s and 70s as a kid. And then, you grow to kind of love these actors like that, and they end up on your podcast. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, I that's why you do it. And so yeah, you get the indies, you get the kind of people you don't even know, but then you get your heroes, so
Hopefully
you get it all.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll keep it going, because it's all about just the consistency of it, and people are always looking to promote their projects, even if they're Werner Herzog, and I love that he was just like naysaying everything, because people like that at that level, they're just like, I mean, can you imagine working on a set with him or whatever? He's just probably just like barking at everybody, all day, like, whatever, I've been doing this. But he can do that, right?
Yes.
So I had a couple other questions. I know you said you're a musician, and I like how you call yourself an armchair film historian.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I was just curious, what are some of your favorite film composers, if you have them, and any movies you would want to discuss that have like the soundtracks and scores that you love, and then maybe just some of the classic movies that you recommend, because not everybody knows, these days, and it's good to get the recommendations to watch the classic films.
But they're not going to be a surprise to your listeners. I mean, there's, of course, like Blade Runner, and I love, like, some work so well, like Taxi Driver, The Godfather, so many fantastic scores. And it's interesting. I told you I work at this radio station. I just started last week. You're going to enjoy this. At 1:00 every day. Well, let me put it this way. Every week I spotlight a different soundtrack. And I'm calling it.
That's a great idea.
I'm calling it the KZE Film Club. And every day that week, I play one track. It is at 1:00 every weekday. I just introduce the track. It's one track off of the soundtrack from that week. and I do a little bit after the song is done. I do a little bit of a, an anecdote or some connections that I drop from the film or from the song. That's like this week is Pulp Fiction, and I played Miserlou, which is a Dick Dale instrumental, which has an interesting history to it. And tomorrow it's going to be, and nobody knows this, is Al Green's, let's get together, let's stay together, rather, let's stay together,
yeah.
which,
What film was that in?
that's in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, okay, right.
Some
They
of it
all
is
the
diegetic music, and some of it
the
would
high
say,
energy, dancing, crazy looking, crazy music.
yeah, I mean, Miserlou was played over the title,
Right.
sequence, towards the beginning of the film.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino, he's a character. He is all
Yeah,
about the music. And I mean, I think music just makes so many movies, especially a movie like that where it's
yeah.
Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
And next week it's going to be like High Fidelity, and
Classic.
I'm urging people to write in at the radio station, to email me, and tell me their favorite soundtracks, and give me some sort of reason why it's your favorite, or some sort of connection you have to it. So that's been great fun, and
I'm gonna have to do that. That sounds
yeah.
awesome.
So there's a lot of great soundtracks, and
yeah, any like indie films that are jumping out at you, kind of classic. I mean, because there's you mentioned a few already, but
oh yeah. Well, I came when I was coming up, and it was like Pulp Fiction was already sort of towards the end of this golden era for me. But I mean, if I'm going to talk about some films, I mean, there's the ones that I discovered, just like that Life is Sweet movie I mentioned earlier, but also ones that have changed my life, like I was living in Boston as a very young man, and I was going to school, and I wandered into this art house cinema, and walked into the wrong movie, because it was like a multiplex, art house cinema multiplex. I walked into the wrong movie. Turns out I was sitting watching Trouble was I'm blank. What, Jim Jarmusch?
Jim Jarmusch.
Not Trouble in Paradise. I'm
No.
like having a senior moment.
Podcasts, they usually have somebody in the back, like searching when someone can't find what they're talking about. We don't have a third person.
I do have producers.
Jim Jarmusch, yeah.
I do have producers now. Stranger Than Paradise.
There we go. Stranger Than Paradise.
Comes back to me, but it's one of my favorite movies. Why did you forget, Adam? Well, because I'm just like, I don't know. My brain has the moments like that. But it's still one of my favorite movies of all time, Stranger Than Paradise. And I've had almost everybody in that movie, but I'm still chasing after Jim Jarmusch for my podcast.
Right. I was about to say Jim Jarmusch has been on your podcast.
No,
I didn't see that one.
and it's been I've been so close. I don't think he'll agree to do it, but if you're out there and you're watching this and you can help me make it, there's a cash reward in it for you. And
is he in LA, or where is he? I wonder. Where's
he's in New York City.
He's in New York City. Oh, right. He always I wonder why that's a problem.
Lower East Side dude.
Oh, right.
Yeah, still to this day.
Right.
I was just showing my girlfriend Women in Love, which is is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, The American Friend is another. I also love let's see, what else have I always recommending. The American Friend, Wim Wenders, by the way. And then I'm trying to, also recommendations that aren't, everyday popular titles that everybody is aware of already. Of course, I love Rosemary's Baby, and I love, I love The Conversation, which is Coppola. He made that sandwich in between Godfathers 1 and 2 somehow. Apocalypse, of course, everybody. I'm a big fan. I'm reading right now, actually, getting to the film historian aspect. I read a lot of film history books and books about films. So that's a big thing for me. Do the Right Thing is a seminal film that I think everybody needs to see. It's super, super important. Blue Velvet,
Blue Velvet, love Blue Velvet.
And I mean, Paris, Texas also, of course, speaking of Wim Wenders. I mean, there's just so many incredible movies, but my sweet spot is definitely like 80s into the 90s. Hal Hartley movies and Desperately Seeking Susan.
Classic, yeah. It's
Yeah,
funny how some of those they're slower paced, and it's interesting because everything nowadays is so much more fast paced.
yeah.
And when you watch it's kind of like a meditation compared to what is out today, but it's actually really it's relaxing to some degree, like if
Mhm.
you're watching things and you're expecting, crazy cuts and just the movement, it's
Yeah.
slower in the 80s, but they stand the test of time, the classic films. Well, I do have just one last question. So go ahead and tell us how we can subscribe to the Filmwax podcast, how we can get there, and then just any social media or other things that you can give us. And then of course we'll put the links directly underneath the video.
Sure. Filmwax is available on all of the podcast apps, from Apple to Spotify, Audible, it's just in iHeartRadio. It's on basically all of those. And of course you can go to filmwaxradio.com. I'm not on TikTok. I tried that. I just don't have
Oh my God. We were
but
just
I'm
talking about that. I'm sorry. It's like,
yeah.
what? I think it was a young person telling me that she went to see a band at Colony, and apparently they're from the
Yeah.
90s. And
Oh.
because I have music that I distribute too. And now part of my distribution is it goes to TikTok. So I
Oh.
thought, okay, what is that?
Sure.
But I think what it is like when young people, this is how sort of out of touch I'm trying to be in touch. I'm in my 40s, but it's just like TikTok just blows our minds. But apparently it's like they select your song, like, from their list or whatever that they have, and then they add some crazy viral video to it. So
Right.
apparently this 90s band, which was it's just like a instrumental, like kind of like noise rock band,
Uh-huh.
they blew up on TikTok. So there was a bunch of 17-year-olds there at the
Oh, that's
show.
funny.
And it's just this whole thing where they're basically taking, a song of yours and then putting it to one of their videos. And
Right,
that's how
sure.
you can just blow up. And then it was just crazy to me. So
It is kind of crazy, but
wild, right?
good for that band.
It is what it is. Good for them.
Yeah.
Although it was just like strange and it was just
Right.
weird because
Is it going to sustain and all that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
great. Okay, well, let's wrap it up. I just want to thank Adam, and that is it for this episode of the Woodstock Film Festival Let's Talk Film podcast. Don't forget to please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the like button and follow us on Instagram. We're Woodstock Film Festival, and we will see you next time.